welcome back. So if you remember last week, we were talking about, or if you weren't here last week, we were talking about the concept of how important it is to think about the internal aspects of Judaism, how much Yiddishkeit and the Torah lifestyle requires us to focus inward, to think about not just the outward actions, but how we think on the inside, how we feel. And we went through a bunch of different stories, different Gemaras and texts and other ideas that brought out this point of the importance and the magnitude and how much Hashem really wants us to grow internally, not just externally. We call it internal Judaism. Rahmana Libabai, the Gemara said, based on a pasuk, that God desires the heart. God desires internal feelings, internal growth, and that should be congruous to our outside actions. And we saw that sometimes someone has to weigh what he's going to do with his actions compared to how he feels. And that it's very important to always be aware of where we are really feeling, how much do we really internalize and accept the messages and the ideas that we are believing in and that we know, and how much do we feel them. And not just act upon them, but also how much does it go on the inside. So this week, we're going to take that concept and turn it on its head and talk about external Judaism, talk about the importance and the impact and the effect of action, and how that can impact how we feel, and how that can impact how we think, and the importance sometimes of doing actions even though we don't feel it, or even though we don't believe it fully, or we're not really on that level, but we should do it anyway sometimes. And to try to come to a balanced approach of both ideas. On the one hand, focusing on the internal, how we think and feel, and also focusing on the external, and that's really what, in some people's opinion, is one of the great breakthroughs and powerful messages of Judaism, is that they're both important and they both have tremendous impact. Not just how you think and feel, but also how you act, and vice versa. Not just how you act, but also how you feel. So let's take a look at some incidences in the Torah, in Chazal, in the Talmud, in the Midrashic lore, in the different traditions, in different stories, and rabbinic teachings, which can bring out some of these points and shed a little light in each different area. So we know in the Torah, towards the end, there's in Sefer Bamidbar, there's a story of Korach. Korach rebelled against Moshe. He said that Moshe shouldn't be the leader, that the Jewish people should have other leaders, whatever his argument was. And we know that he had some people coming along with him, and some of them stayed with him till the bitter end, and they were destroyed, but some of them turned around. They backtracked. They got saved, and they didn't follow him all the way to the end. They were with him most of the way, but at some point they turned around and they said, no, this guy's wrong. His sons. So the Medrash says, why did his sons turn around? What was the schut? What was the suchus? What was the merit? What was something that they did right that they got saved? What was the turning point, the tipping point in their thought process, in their allegiance, that they went away from their father? So the Medrash says in the Yalkut Shimoni, it says, what was the precise merit? What was the thing that turned them around, the sons of Korach, that they were saved? So the Medrash says, they were sitting with their father Korach. They were on his side. Rowan as Moshe, they saw Moshe walking by. They wanted to turn away. They didn't want to look at Moshe. They said, we have a dilemma. If we stand up for Moshe, who's the leader of the Jewish people at this point, even though we disagree, but we should still rise in honor of him to show him some kavod, some respect. But however, if we do that, that is a disgrace to our father. It's a direct affront to his perspective. It's a mitzvah of the Torah to honor your father and mother. And if we don't, but the Torah says you should rise in front of a Torah scholar, even if he's not, even if we disagree with his policies. But he's still a Torah scholar. He's still, even if he's not a Torah scholar, they say it said to rise before an older person over a certain age. So they said they came to a decision. They said, "Mutav shenamu lepnei Moshe Rabbeinu." Let's stand up in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. Af al pi she'anu nagim mizar be'avinu. We have a dichotomy. We have a head-on collision. If we do one, we disrespect the other, and there's nothing we can do. We have to pick one. We can't just do nothing, because doing nothing is in actuality a disgrace to Moshe. So they said we can't. We have to stand up for Moshe. They made a decision. They decided we got to stand up for Moshe. It says the measures, but also Shah Yechishus Liun B'Tshuva. That action, that moment, caused them to do tshuva, and they immediately backtracked from their father. It caused a turnaround in their outlook, and they left their father Korach, and they went with Moshe. They said, "Our father is wrong." So it appears that this small action, this little incident of just, now obviously it was very impactful, very powerful, because it was showing a certain allegiance to Moshe, but at the same time, they only meant it as a pure action. They didn't really believe that they were standing up for Moshe. They didn't believe that he was right. They didn't think they were going to change their mindset. They thought, we are sticking with our father, but we have a dilemma. We don't know what to do. If we have to stand up for him. He's an older man. He's a Torah scholar. We have to rise in respect. They didn't think that was going to cause them to change their mind. Their whole life philosophy was they put their money at stake with this. They put their lives at stake. They knew that this was a dangerous move to violate and to go against the leader of the Jewish people. But they felt they were going to change their mind. For whatever Korach was not Russia. Korach was a tzaddik at the beginning. Korach was one of the greatest leaders. He felt Moshe was doing something wrong. But he knew that this was a face-off. He knew that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. He knew that it was him versus Moshe. So his sons knew the same thing. They knew that their lives were the same. So they invested their whole life. Imagine you invested your whole life saving, your whole life mission. Everything you stand for is in one direction. It's diametrically opposed, exactly opposed to another one's opinion, and you think you're right. But all of a sudden, what happens? They saw him walking by, and they stood up. That had a huge impact on their whole philosophy. That little action. So we see from here a tremendous, tremendous insight into the power of an action. The power of just doing a physical act without the thought behind it. Without any intention to go down that path, to become a Baal Tshuva, to run away from one's whole lifestyle and their philosophy and this wasn't just a huge difference. It wasn't such a clear distinction who was right and who was wrong. Many people thought Korach was right, many people thought Moshe was right. According to some Mepharshim, almost all the Jewish people went with Korach at one point. Korach was very charismatic. Korach had very convincing arguments. It wasn't so clear. We see it clearly. We read the Torah. It says Moshe was right and Korach was wrong. But if we would have been there, it wouldn't have been so clear to us. It was a small, subtle point, but however, it spelled a huge difference. It was a difference in philosophy. So, and they invested in one side, and they were hook, line, and sinker. They were bought in. They were all in. All their chips were on the table. All their chips were on that. Were betting on Korah. But because they had this dilemma, they didn't know what to do, and they rose in respect for Moshe. That triggered, that capitulated them to the other side. They switched sides. They switched their whole path in life, and they were actually saved. And that led to a turnaround of events, and they said, we're not going to Korah. So we see a tremendous insight in the power of action. The power of just doing something, even though you don't believe it, you're not willing to invest in that cause, but you stand up for a certain cause, you go a certain path, even if it's just outwardly. I don't believe it. I'm just going because I have to. What am I supposed to do? He's a great man. I'm standing up. I don't believe he's right. I think he's wrong. I have a lot invested on the other side. That power of that action turned them around. And this is really what the Mesilas Yesharim tells us, and we'll see in a minute the Sefer HaChinuch, that this is one of the most powerful ideas in Judaism, is doing actions. Actions lead to understanding, they lead to feeling, and they lead to believing, and they lead to actually changing one's life. And Mesilas Yesharim says, a famous idea, he says, if someone doesn't really fully believe something, he says, if you're not holding at that point, you can't just feel it and believe it by thinking it. Eitzotovehi, there's a great idea. She is daris beretzono. Try to spur up your feeling, your desire, and then the external action will ignite, will stir up an internal response. It's easier for somebody to do something externally than it is internally. It's much deeper, it's much more ingrained. Our internal ideas, our internal consciousness, we can't just take a knife and cut it out and change what's going on in our subconscious and our inner recesses. But the external, we have a lot more control. We can take our hand and do something. We can take our mouth and say the right thing. We have more control over that. And he says that will lead to a ripple effect that will cause us to change on the inside. And that's a great insight and a great idea, a great trick for somebody who's trying to change how they think, how they believe, to do an action in that direction. And we see how even a little action in the right direction will cause a ripple effect. There's a trickle-down process that causes one to do that. That's the Mesilas Yesharim mentions this frequently in his thesis of how to change one's behavior and one's thought process and how one really feels is by focusing on the actions externally. Similar vein is the Sefer HaChinuch, which is a lot earlier than the Mesilas Yesharim. We don't know exactly when it was written, but it was pretty early. Time of Rishonim probably, I think. And his famous idea. So that's what Mesilas Yesharim says. Chitzonis Ma'or HaPnimius. The outside triggers the inside. That's his code word. The Sefer HaChinuch code word is a famous line. He says, Ki ha'adam nifal kefi pa'ulosav. A person acts according to his actions. A person responds to his actions. And actually, it's interesting. The original source, the first time he brings this, is when the Jewish people were in Mitzrayim, and they were slaves, of course. So comes along Moshe Rabbeinu and says, "You're going to be free." God gave me the signs, and he showed them the blood. He showed them that he has the rod of Hashem, and he showed all the makos right to Paro. And the Jewish people believed, and now they saw that God is in charge. God's going to take them out, and the words of their forefathers are really going to come true. But they're still slaves in Egypt. But he says, "This is the last night. We're going out soon, but I want you to prepare Karban Pesach." The first Karban Pesach was in Mitzrayim, where they had to slaughter the sheep and take the blood and paint the doorway. And this way, when the angel of death was passing through, they wouldn't get killed. So, but the whole process of the Karban Pesach was very insightful. At that moment, they were actually doing this special service of bringing the Karban, they were going to eat it, and there were certain rules of how they were going to eat it. One of the rules is that you cannot break a bone of a Karban Pesach. The bones are not allowed to be broken. If you break a bone in it, it's invalidated. So the Sefer HaChinuch explains what is the big deal about breaking the bones. So he says like this. He says, what's going on here with the Jewish people? They are slaves right now. But Hashem wants them to be, I want you to be the princes. I want you to be my children, the kings of the world, the princes of the world. You're going to be royalty. Right now you're downtrodden. Right now you're down in the dumps. But soon I'm going to take you out. I'm going to bring you to Har Sinai. I'm going to give you my Torah, my plan for the entire creation. And you're going to be number one. You're going to be the one who has to be the light unto the nations. You're going to be the ones who everyone is supposed to look up to. So I want you to start acting that way, says the Sefer HaChinuch. He says, if you want to be a king, you've got to act like one. So he says, it's appropriate for us we should do actions to show others and to show ourselves that we are really on that level. Once we do an external action, we will feel it internally. And he says, therefore, when you break a bone, that is something that is for the peasants. They don't have flowing meat. They don't have tons of food. They need to break the bones to suck out the juices. They want to get as much as they can from their little piece of chicken, a little piece of meat. But if you're a king, you ask for another piece and it comes straight from the kitchen. So if you're a king, you don't break bones. I don't want you breaking bones. So even this little action, this little detail that God is giving us, and of course we know that everything we do on Pesach is really based on this concept. Why do we eat matzah? Why do we lean? Why do we drink so much wine? Why are we eating the bitter herbs? Everything we are doing is an action. We could all sit around around the table, drink tea, and talk about how we're in Mitzrayim and God took us out very nice and we're so lucky. But if we perform an action, if we do it and we do it in such a way that it's showing royalty, we're leaning, we're proving to ourselves we are royalty. So that is a tremendous impact, and that's what he says. It's a axiomatic that a person is triggered and affected in a tremendous way in the Judaism action, and that really explains almost so many mitzvahs that we do. We put on tefillin, we shake a lulav, we go on the sukkah. We're doing actions which are supposed to impact, keeping in mind what we said last time, that it's supposed to have an impact on our feelings and our thoughts and go in internally. It's also good to recognize that the action itself has a tremendous impact, even if we don't really focus 100% on what we're doing, because God just wants us to do it. How do we know? So there's an interesting story where sometimes even without thinking about it, it will have this effect. In other words, we've seen until now that the power of an action can lead us down the path of feeling it internally. When Korach did something that was appropriate, that was respectful, they ended up believing that side of the equation. And similarly, a lot of the mitzvahs are designed in such a way that we act as royalty, we become royalty. We act in a certain way, we end up becoming like that. So there's an interesting medrash which discusses how we're supposed to view this process of sometimes just doing it without thinking about it, because it will trigger that feeling. There we go. Oh, here it is. So we saw recently, a couple of weeks ago in the Parsha, Avram Avinu was going to the Akedah with his son Yitzchak. Another interesting story in the Torah. And the Medrash tells us some of the details, some of the background that happened on the way. So the Medrash says like this: Bolo Samael, the Satan, the Yitzhara, whoever that is, the devil, somebody, the power of that Hashem put in the world that leads us to do Averos, came to Avram Avinu. Amarlei, Saba, you old man, Ovedas Libach, you've lost your mind. This is your son. He was given to you at 100 years old. You're just going to slaughter him? Amarlo, he said to him, Al Menas came. Even so, or it means that even if what you're saying is true, I'm going to do it anyway. Al Menas came means I'll do it anyway. I don't care what you say. I'm doing it anyway. He says to him, he tried another argument. He said, yeah, if you pass this test, okay, God will give you another test. Who says you're going to pass that one? So he said the same argument. He said, came. He says, it doesn't matter. I'm doing it anyway. That was his response. I'm doing it anyway. So if we think about this for a minute, what's this response of came? Right? And my Rosh Hashanah used to quote this many, many times. What's going on here? The Satan comes to him and has some type of logical argument. He's saying, your son is you got this son as a present. It was a miracle from God. Why are you slaughtering him? And then he said another argument. He said that God's going to test you again. Or there's a third argument. The third argument is that it says in the Torah you can't kill. Well, he had a lot of arguments. So what Avram doesn't, it sounds like Avram is not answering the question. He's saying, I'm going to do it anyway. That sounds like he's saying, you know what, you're right. God did give it to me this son miraculously. Or you're right that it's considered murder. Or that you're right that God's going to give me another test and I'm going to fail tomorrow. But I'm going to do it anyway. So what is he saying that he's right? Why is he telling him that he's right? So anybody have an answer? Let's open up the class.
He went after the last sibui.
What do you mean?
The last sibui was...
Hashem said to do it.
Yeah.
So why didn't he say that? He should have said, Hashem told me to do it, I have to do what Hashem said.
What is Almenat Ken?
You tell me. I don't know. What does it mean?
Almenat Ken doesn't mean in any way.
Yes.
Almenat Ken.
Yeah.
Because that.
Because of what? Because of what he said?
Because of what Hashem told me now to do. I don't care about other things. Now he told me to do it, now I'm going to do it. Without thinking.
Without thinking. Yeah. When he's not thinking, he's supposed to think.
No, he doesn't to think. If Hashem told him now, take your son and check them, So,
It doesn't matter.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, so,
Aren't we asked to do things that defy logic?
right, but what happens when the Yetzer Hara brings a logical argument? So that's what we're supposed to say, that it's not logical?
He doesn't have to answer it, we have to answer.
No, it
Well, why
doesn't.
didn't he answer it?
It
Didn't he have an answer?
Okay, it doesn't matter if it's logical. Hashem told us to do it.
Why is he telling, okay, great, exactly, yeah, that is, I think that's what the measure is saying. But why did he say that to the Yetzer Hara? Why is that the argument he's using?
He said, I'm going against the logic.
It doesn't matter if
I'm
it's
going
right or
against-
not.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's right, it
No,
doesn't
he's
matter.
going to do it anyway, so it
But
doesn't
is it
matter.
wrong or is it right?
He doesn't say.
Why not? If it's wrong, it's wrong. Why would you say he was doing it if
If
it's wrong?
Hashem says it, to do it, it must be right.
But that means that
I was
Hashem
reading
didn't
that-
say it. Hashem would say that it's wrong.
He didn't actually, well, I was reading somewhere though that he might have been thinking that Isaac would be saved, just like he was saved in the furnace.
Ah,
That
okay.
it would come out all right, somehow it would come out okay.
That's true. It could be he was thinking that. Right. But that's possible. That's possible. That's interesting. The thing is over here, in this medrash, this specific medrash, he's not using that argument. You know, there are different midrashim, there are different conflicting. Sometimes we have conflicting
I
versions.
understand
But this medrash is trying to teach us
I
a lesson.
understand al menat ken in
Yeah.
Hebrew means even though.
Even though, right?
Oh.
In other words, even if you're right.
Because the Rebbe Shalom didn't tell him don't kill.
Yeah, he didn't.
He came by himself.
He said,
Okay,
bring
but
him up.
Hashem-
He said, Hallelu, right? Bring him up to the mountain. He didn't say to kill him.
But
Right?
all the other mitzvahs,
Yeah.
Hashem didn't
He
command.
figured it out.
He figured it out.
Yeah.
Here Hashem told him clearly.
Well, some people say it wasn't so clear. Some people say,
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, it's like, it's
right. So Hashem said it, but okay. So the point I want to bring out is basically what you're saying, but one more step is that it's true. We have to do it if we know that Hashem said it. We have to do it no matter what the logic, even if it's not logical. If we know that's what God said. But what you see from here is the way Avram engaged the Yetzer Hara or the Satan was that he didn't engage the Yetzer Hara. In other words, it's true that we have to do it. That's when we are commanded to do something. We do it even though we don't understand it. We do it even though it's not. We're not logically at that level. We don't feel it 100%. But this is giving us an added insight that sometimes if we get into an argument, it will just make it worse. If we try to prove it to ourselves, we try to say yes, it really is true, or it's really because of this. Sometimes it's worth it not to get into an argument, to ignore the facts, because sometimes if we get dragged in, it's going to be worse for us. So how does this fit into what we're saying? So I think this connects by saying that sometimes it's worth it not to think about what it will be the effect, or what we're going to think, or how we're going to feel, and we're not sure, I don't know, maybe I'm tired, maybe I'm not, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, maybe I shouldn't. Sometimes it is worth it to do that, but sometimes if we know we're just going to lose that argument, and we know 100% that it's the right thing, we should do it anyway, because like we said before, we see the power of action, just sometimes plowing through doing it and saying, Amanas came, I know this is what I have to do, I can't get into any arguments. In other words, you see the power of saying head on that I'm not going to argue with you head on. We don't argue with the Yetzer Hara head on. That's what we, a lot of times we see from here. That we shouldn't argue with the Yetzer Hara, or sometimes other people who just say, yeah, you know, maybe you're right, but this is what I have to do. It's not worth it to get into an argument. And we see that even with ourselves. Who's the Yetzer Hara? The Yetzer Hara is ourselves. It's in our mind. It's in our subconscious sometimes. We feel a certain way. So sometimes it's worth it not to get into an argument, to say, I got to do what I got to do that action that we were talking about earlier. And actually, the Pele Yoetz was a Musar Sefer who says really a very powerful statement. Not only is this the meaning of some of the mitzvahs and the power of doing the action, but he said like this. This is unbelievable. Kol hayahadus toli kazeh. He says all of Judaism is dependent on this. What's this? Regilus, doing something many times over, just getting into the habit of doing the right thing. So that's all of Judaism. This is what he posits. Kirak hascholos kashos. It's only hard to get started. So he says a powerful statement. He says what you got to do is to harness the power of habit. Many times, and we hinted at this last time, maybe we'll get into it a little more, that habit can be a negative thing. You do something habitually, so you don't think about it anymore. You don't feel it, you don't believe it, you don't really focus on it, you're used to it, you don't even realize what you're doing. But he says the opposite. He says that an amazing way to serve Hashem is to get yourself into the habit of doing the right thing. If you're always waking up in the morning, you're always doing the right thing, you're always going through the year, going through your days, going through your weeks of keeping the mitzvahs, of doing what you're supposed to do, that will make it so much easier for you because you're doing it anyway. And harness the power of habit, harness the power of action, similar to what we were saying before, that if you start doing the right thing, it becomes easier for you because the power of action is such that it gets ingrained into your very being and you just keep doing it. And Rabbi Salanter also uses this idea, not just like the Mesilas Yesharim said, and not just like the Sefer HaChinuch, that the actions can bring about a feeling on the inside, but also actions create more action. The more you do it, the more you're used to something, the habit is a tremendous benefit. It's a tremendous gift that Hashem has given us. We can use habit to create positive ways, positive ideas within us. To constantly do it over and over again, it becomes easier because, like some people know, and some people use this thing. Every time you start, it's hard. That means when you're not starting, it's easy. When you keep doing it, it's easier. That's the point that he's making. So he says that if you keep doing it, you'll feel very good about yourself. You'll just go on that path. It'll be a lot easier for you. We know the opposite effect is also true. When we do an aveira, when we do something wrong many times, we also don't think about it. We just keep doing our habits in the negative sense. But it's always good to think about, hey, wait a minute. We can use it in the positive sense too, and it's very beneficial for us. And really, Rabbi Salanter says that this is the way to correct anything that we have wrong within us. If we see a problem, we see something wrong, and we want to correct it, we should make a little change. Make a little change. Do a little action of where we want to be. Like we pointed out last time, not too much where we want to be. We don't want to be incongruous of where we're up to, but one step ahead, one step further, one little step at a time. If we keep up doing that, it'll be easier for us. The first time it's going to be hard. But after that, it'll become second nature, and then eventually we'll start believing it, eventually start feeling it. But to actually do it, it gets easier as time goes on, as we know from the power of habit.
The point always changes.
Yeah.
That's why. So
Which
whenever
point?
Like this, it says that.
Yes.
You know, okay, you've got this, and you have to go to the next one.
Include the Sabachira.
Yeah.
That's what he calls it, right? So the question is always how often does it change, and how often are we still on the same point? Of course, each person has to do their own analysis, but that's exactly the point.
So every new step,
Yes.
it's a new beginning. So every step is difficult.
Okay, but not if you're doing it basically within the same arena, the same area of exactly. Yeah.
But maybe it's kosher. It's still difficult.
But it's not new. It's still
No, but
because it's a new day.
But it's not something completely new. But it's
Right.
like a scholar.
Yeah. Okay, a lot of things that we do are basically in the same. Yes, new things get thrown at us every day. Something new happens, right? Actually, we'll see later that the Gemara says this. Right? It says that. I was going to say this later, but I'll say it now. The Gemara says the Yetzer Hara does that. It says Kol Yom. Every day he starts up anew. He starts again. It says the Gemara, right? It's in Kedushin. The Gemara in Kedushin says Yetzer Shel Adam Misgaber Mischadesh. He says like you, Mischadesh Allah B'chol Yom. The Yetzer Hara comes and he strengthens a person every day. Mischadesh. He comes with something new every day. So you're right. Really, every day there is something new that you have to deal with. You never really conquered the Yetzer Hara because he's always going to raise the bar. Once you're lifting 10 pounds, he's going to make it to 11 pounds. So it's true that there's something new, but at the same time, there is a certain power of the habit.
But also, I heard this one should be motivate the person when he sees that it's difficult for him, not to think that he failed.
Of course.
But he's in
a new position. That's right.
New position.
That's
So
right.
means he's on a
Yeah.
new level.
Yeah, they say that from the Gra also, that there's no such thing as in one level.
Right.
Here that he has an exact. This is the Gra and Evan Shalima, Parak Dalid, section test. He says that if you always, there's no such thing as staying constant. You're always moving. So usually we're moving up. But the point is to harness this power of action and to try to use it in a positive way. It will be very, very beneficial for us, and it will have that impact on our internal.
My brother told me that
Yeah.
my father told him, Kol ha-scholos kosheros.
Uh-huh.
A lot of scholos. But if it's only one, it's not kosher.
Really? Aha,
Atchalot.
aha. It's plural. Aha.
If it's
What
singular,
does it
it's not a kosher.
Kirakas cholos kashos, yeah, it's what it says. Aha, the beginnings.
If you're stacking few things together, so then it's
Ah.
difficult. But if you're stacking only
Right,
one
right,
thing,
right. Okay, but there's always going to be somewhat of a difficulty in something that you're doing new. If it's a change, it's a little, but you're right. That's the point to find. It's true, but to find, it's true because if you find something that's small, it's a little bit of a change. It's much easier than starting a big project, something that's large.
Supposed to divide it into steps.
Exactly, right, to divide it into steps. Now, speaking of the power of habit, I found some interesting ideas on that. Oh, here it is. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz has a big piece on this, where he goes through how the power of habit is a good way. Is on the one hand is very powerful for us. Is very good for us to keep doing things in one way. On the other hand, as a negative, that we get used to something, and this is where the circle continues. This is what I'm getting at. To go back to last week where we talked about the inside. And then we'll see if we can come up with some type of insight, some type of trick, how we can avoid the circle. So he says like this. The pasuk says when Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, died, they went to the Beis Hamikdash, into the Mishkan improperly. They brought the Ketorah, so they weren't supposed to. So Hashem comes down and tells Aaron, I think this is when it is, and he comes and tells Aaron a certain halacha. He says, Daber al Aaron achicha, tell Aaron your brother. He says to Moshe, tell Aaron your brother, the al yavo b'chol eisel hakodesh. He should not come all the time into the holy kodesh of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Mishkan. V'lo yamus, and this way he won't die. Ki anan eir el kaporos. My presence, Rashi says, Gilo Shkinasi Sham. The Shekhinah is inside the Kodesh of Hashem, on top of the Aron. So Rashi says, why shouldn't he come in all the time? Yizar shelo yargil lavo. He should not come habituated in seeing the presence of God. And this is a very, very powerful statement. We're talking about a Kohen Gadol, the highest level. He's probably, every day he's coming up with a new thing. Higher levels every single day. He's not sitting in his habit. And he comes to the Beis Hamikdash. We know the Beis Hamikdash itself was designed to create an awesome fear in every single person. There was fire, there were flames, there were actually guards standing around, Kohanim, there were guards holding torches around the Beis Hamikdash to inspire people. This is a holy place, this is the palace of the king. And you'd see all the miracles, you'd walk inside, you'd see the Kohanim running around. And then he went into the Kodesh, where only the Kohanim are allowed to go. There's the Mizbeach, the Aron. The lights of the candle are burning, they don't go out, right? And you have the bread, which is still fresh. And everything that's going on is miraculous. You feel God's presence. You walk into the Kodesh HaKodashim and you see God's presence, right? The Shekhinah is there. But yet, if he did it too many times, he's going to become used to it. Even on such a high level, the power of getting habituated and feeling like something is no big deal can even happen on the highest level. Aaron Cohen, the Kohen Gadol, in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Kodesh HaKodashim, he can become used to it. And a similar thing, it's the Chassid Yaivitz brings down in Pirkei Avos on the pasuk in Yechezkel. We read this in one of the Haftorahs. It says, "V'vo'am ha'aretz lefnei Hashem b'moadim." There was a rule, and when the Jewish people would come to the Beis Hamikdash, this is later on when they actually had the Beis Hamikdash, they would come to the on the holidays. Ba'derech Sha'ar Tzafon, if you came in the north gate, Yetzi Derech Sha'ar Negev, you come out the south gate. You were not allowed to go in and come back the same way you came, even if that was your destination. People who came from the south of Israel would walk from the south to the Beis Hamikdash. Those who came from the north would go into the north gate. There were four gates. There were gates on all sides of the Beis Hamikdash, which you can see some of them today, which are on the mountain. But the laws, you're not allowed to go through the same one twice. Why? Says the Chazon Eretz, Ki b'teva ha'adam is the nature of man, lakutz b'dvarim b'hasim adasam. To actually, not only do you become used to something, you become annoyed, you become disgusted. I'm used to this already. You don't like it. And this is talking about the Beis HaMikdash. The people are coming, and they weren't coming so often. They were coming 3 times a year to Ovi Olaredo, right? But if on that day you went back the same way, you're going to lose your inspiration. You'll say a little bit, Beis HaMikdash is a big deal.
For that young Israel, you have 2 doors.
That's why we have 2 doors in the shul. If you go in one way, you have to go out the other. That's why you go through the parking lot. That's why you don't lose the inspiration. Yes. So he says, and this is what he's going on. He's going on the statement in Pirkei Avos. It says, "Havishosam b'tzama es b'vreim." In Pirkei Avos it says you should drink with thirst. The words of the sages. Why does it say with thirst? It means you should not be used to it. You should still be thirsty. Even if you drink more, you should still be thirsty. You should always try to be learning something new. But the point is that it still applies to such an extent to the Beis HaMikdash. And we know, of course, the most famous statement of this is in Yeshaya, where the Navi is threatening the Jewish people with destruction. It actually uses a double lashon. It says, "Anochi Hineni Yosef lahafle sa'amazeh hafle v'fela." I will come and add to these people. The statement hafle v'fela, wonder of wonders, is talking about the negative. It's a destructive wonders, double destruction. And what is it talking about? It says, "Yan ki nigash ha'amazeh b'fimu v'svasam kinduni b'livo rachak mimeni." These people have approached me, God says, with their mouth and with their lips, but their heart is not with me. He also see mitzvahs anashim milumada, an action of people milumada, as if it was learned, as if they were used to it. This is a famous thing. Mitzvahs anashim milumada, that people do things out of habit. So the Navi was saying that this is actually a double destruction. Hafle v'fela, which is not used anywhere else. In other places in the Torah, when God is upset, He only uses one hafle. It says, "V'hifla Hashem es makoscha." In Devarim, by the Tochacha, it says Hashem will do a wondrous damage. Will beat you. Will hit you wondrously. But over here, when it comes to doing actions without thought, it says wonder of wonders. So to do something without thought is a tremendous negative in the eyes of God, and we see why. Because the more you do it, the more you get. Not only you don't think about it, but you become disgusted. The Chassid Yavit says, "Lokutz with Dvarim." He brings also in Mishlei, it says the same thing. Don't hang around your friend too much because you won't like him anymore, right? What do they say? Separation makes the heart grow fonder. But if you stay around, it's not going to be good, even for somebody you love, even for the Beis HaMikdash. So basically what we have here is a problem. On the one hand, we're told we should do things habitually. We see the power of action. On the other hand, what happens? We do things and we become habituated, and God is upset at us. God says, "Mitzvah sanashim l'mada," you're not thinking about what you're doing, right? So how do we deal with this dichotomy? How do we deal with this contradiction? Anybody have any ideas? Solution, right? On the one hand, we always talk about the action. You're supposed to act in a certain way. On the other hand, we're saying, yeah, but you have to feel it, you have to believe it. So how do we do both? How do we accomplish this?
Maybe not at the beginning, just to start first.
Well, we're not a beginning. Nobody here is a beginning. I mean, we're all young, but
Oh, when somebody does something,
we're not that young.
so we start at the beginning to do it, just to do it, because to do it without thinking.
Without thinking, yeah.
And after that, when he's already on the road, then, to start to think about it, to research, what's the reason, what do I have to
To start
etc.
feel, okay,
But
that's
first of all,
good.
they have to start.
That's good. But how do you constantly maintain that? Maybe what we see, you're going to lose it, because what happens, you start doing something, it becomes natural. You don't think about it.
What he says.
So I found an Eitzah, advice from Rabbi Aaron Kotler. He has a sefer called Mishnas Aaron, and it's actually on the Mesilas in the He's talking about the Mesilas. Oh, here it is. It's on the Mesilas Aaron. So he says like this. He brings the Gemara in Brachos. So this is going to be the solution, and we'll end with that. So he brings the Gemara in Brachos. The Gemara in Brachos says, "Ha'ozet filoso keva ein filoso tachnunim." If you daven, if you pray, keva, the same thing over and over, you're not going to be answered. It doesn't have the same heart. It doesn't have the same feeling because you're just saying the same thing. And Rat says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef, the Amitavayo, closer to Yachal Chadish B'davar. What does it mean that your tefillah, your prayer is the same? He says you didn't come up with anything new. When you request, if it's the same every day, then you're not going to be answered. So, and then he brings the Gemara in Kedushin, that also we said before, that the Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer Hara comes with something new every day. So says Rabbi Kala, we see from here, the Eitzah, the solution to feeling something and not getting bogged down with habit is to do a little bit something new. When we are davening, it says the Gemara is saying that you have to add something new to your prayers. It doesn't mean you should change the whole prayer. It doesn't mean one day you have a different whole sitter. You use chakras. Chakras is the same chakras every day, right? Especially after we have the Anchikas and Dolim Masakin our prayers. We do the same thing every day. We do the same thing every year. We do the same thing every Shabbos, the same thing every Pesach. It's always the same. And we do have to invest in becoming habituated and doing a habit. But if we always have a little bit something new, that's what he says. Because, like you said before, the Yetzer Hara is always also coming up with something new. So if we look inside and try to find a little bit hischadshus, something new,
in the thought or in the speech?
he says everything. So he says, "Cloud burn, thinking, knowledge, and action. In each one, in how you think, and how you feel, and how you act, you should do something a little bit."
In the davening, to speak, to add.
Yeah, so I think what we do in davening, some people say at the end of davening, when you right before you take three, right, or either in Shema Koleinu, you can add your own prayers, or right before you take 3 steps back, you can say something, you can add something to the prayer. So I think that's what they say, to add something new. So this way, this I think is the eitzah, this is the solution. Because on the one hand, we have to say Almanaske. We have to say like Avraham Avinu. We can't get into a discussion with the Yetzer Hara, we'll get dragged down. Is it right, is it wrong, do I feel, do I not feel? We have to do what we have to do anyway. We have to harness the power of habit, because it's so powerful that it makes it easier. It's not a fight anymore. I'm doing it anyways, this is what I always do. It's not a big deal for me to keep Shabbos now, because I do it every week, or anything like that. But on the other hand, we don't want to fall into the trap, into the danger of just doing it without thinking. So it seems that the solution is to come up with hischadshus, to try to do something new, to add something new. Not too much, not too extreme. We don't want to add too much to the Torah, too much to what we're doing, like we said in the Nekudas Samachim, where we are up to. But there should always be something new. Some hischadshus is very important. It keeps us in that balance that we are doing the action, we're also thinking about it, back and forth.
There's always something different.
There's always something different, right?
Even though you're just saying the same prayers,
Right.
you always somehow stop and say.
Exactly.
There's always.
That's great.
something
Right.
like that.
Right.
It's kind of like you've got the foundation.
You've got the foundation.
And you're building.
We build it, right. But sometimes we have to think about it. Sometimes if we don't think about it, we get caught up.
Right. A big thing in psychology
Yes.
these days is mindfulness.
Yes, I read about that. Yeah.
And it's being in today, in the here and now.
Living in the moment, yeah.
Right. So if we're doing that, we don't allow ourselves to just
That's right.
automatic pilot.
To appreciate whatever's happening at this moment, right? Not looking for a next email or a text message or.
Right.
Right.
Very modern,
Yeah.
also very ancient.
Right, exactly.
I know.
It's true.
I
In
know.
true psychology, they're catching up. They're catching up. They are catching up. It's very exciting, actually. Yeah, you hear people talking about